to another episode of NusantaraX Playbook, part of NusantaraX Podcast Series, which is a series created to give international leaders a real understanding of how Indonesia works, directly from established professionals who have built their careers in multinational companies. Today, we have Bu Vidia, which is a human resource director with over 15 years working experience with Indonesian multinational companies. So, Bu Vidia, welcome to Nusantara X Playbook.
Thank you, Mas Deswin, for the invitation. Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much, Bu Vidia. All right, maybe without further ado, let's just go to the very first question.
Sure.
Bu Vidia, according to your experience,
Mm.
um, a lot of international foreign capital companies rely on regional or essentially global templates or
Yeah.
guidance for HR documents. Um, what do you think are the adjustments typically needed to localize them for Indonesia market?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for the question, Mas Deswin. Is this actually the essential, basic essential questions that many multinational companies, speaking from my experience, that needs to address? Because the first thing, the global HR standards is a great start because it's kind of a standardizations and it's internationally accepted. But we cannot also neglect the legal local regulations that we need to comply. So the first thing first, the legal and regulatory is non-negotiable because we do have, as many HR professional knows, that we do have like Undang-Undang Ketenagakerjaan, Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, BPJS regulation. So we have like manpower rules, manpower regulations, labor law, and then also BPJS is a kind of a, like social security regulations. That's something that if every multinational company should apply, and something that legally non-negotiable because we need to comply for our operation business in Indonesia. And another thing is sometimes that many international companies are not really in outside Indonesia, but we do have is the employment agreement or employment contracts because as we know, PKWT, PKWTT is terms, basic terms that every HR professional should advise the multinational companies because the regulations changes every time, and also the implementation. So we need to adopt how specifically it direct to our strategy, to people's strategy, clear distinguish when should we hire the fixed term contract, when should we hire the permanent contracts. Another thing is the religious allowance because in many countries we only knows annual salary is 12 times, while in Indonesia we have a 13 salary, which is the religious allowance. It's something that we need to address as an HR professional. We need to advise as a local HR to the multinational companies as well, because it's something that we need to comply, and it's non-negotiable for all employees in Indonesia. And of course, the language, because sometimes the question is the employment contract, can it be in English? No, we need to be in Indonesian language. We can be in bilingual, but still, if there is any dispute, the Indonesian language prevail the legal regulations. That's something that we need to also advise our business owner or our business, our business leaders, especially in multinational companies, that by regulations, Indonesian language in all legal obligation, all legal perspective should prevail rather than other language. That should be. So employment contract, bilingual, but needs to be in Indonesian as well. And sometimes the often underrated things that sometimes not to be addressed is the cultural and practical adjustment. It's not something written in a labor law. It's not something written in theoretical. But so, for example, like if we want to issue the disciplinary actions, like warning letters, we need to tone soft tone, bicultural. We cannot be like a US company that, okay, fire, fire, fire. That's something not culturally acceptable. By regulation, yes, it can be acceptable, but by culturally acceptance, it's not. So we need to also advise this kind of cultural context, cultural practice that is acceptable for Indonesian employees. I think, in short, in general, global HR is sometimes like a framework, but for the implementation itself, we need to adjust with the local regulations to be legally enforceable documents. That's the the bottom line of this.
I understand, Mufidia. I think I totally agree with you. The global HR is there as a guidance
Yes,
for us to be able for the company to still have some sort of identity that is unified across the globe. Whereas for the implementation itself, you need to be able to look at cultural differences. You need to look at local regulation. I mean, regulation in Indonesia sometimes in one city is different from another
exactly.
city. So
Yes,
um the global HR framework should not be the only one, uh, should not be the only guidance for local HR when it comes to making HR policies when it comes to entering Indonesia.
yes,
So
yes.
thank you so much
Totally
for your
agree.
answer, Bufidia. Now, swiftly moving on to the second question. Um, Based on your experience, Bu Vidya,
Mhm.
what regulatory or policy shifts in Indonesia do you
Mhm.
believe foreign companies should monitor closely before entering the market?
Okay, that's a very smart questions because, as you know, labor law or labor law or the guidelines, local regulations, it may change, but it not changes frequently, as we know.
Mm, yeah,
But the implementation itself, for example, like SK, surat keputusan, and anything, it changes over time. So yeah,
mm,
that's a very smart question because the evolution of the regulation and its implementation in Indonesia should be addressed and should be monitored closely, especially by foreign companies. Why? Because, for example, annually we have a UMP, we have a different UMP, basic minimum wage.
yeah,
It affects in every, every budgeting, every salary increment, every merit increase. As a HR professional, that's something that we need to address every year. Inflation rate, something like that.
right.
So, and another thing, for example, like the implementation of the pension age. Pension age is now, sometimes it's not a fixed yet. It's a still gray area and something like that. But it should be monitored as well, because as we know, we need also to plan on our people strategy later on, right? So that's something that we need to address, because some very small tweaks in implementation on the regulations, it can affect cost, risk,
Right.
and of course the operating flexibility of the company itself.
Mm,
So, first of all, monitoring on the labor law and its implementation is a must, because every HR professional should have at least a basic understanding about what's going on, what's the governance of the regulation, and to advise the business owner or the business leaders. And also, one of the things that nowadays HR professional also should monitor and should address is by flexibility of using outsourcing and also the vendor or third parties, because it's something that now it's becoming part of the manpower strategy. So
mm,
for example, like 10 years ago, when we're talking about the manpower strategy, we only think about the headcount,
right.
how many we should hire, how many replacement, how many successions. But nowadays, 10 years later, I'm thinking that based on my experience and also based on my discussion with the HR community so far, they're also including the outsourcing and also the third party vendors in their manpower
Mm,
strategies. Why? Because the business is evolving. The world is changing now. A lot of functions that by legally it can be outsourced to another, not hired directly. And by business, from the business perspective, it will be managing the cost. I'm
Mm,
not
right.
saying cost efficient because sometimes it's not the case, but it's how we manage the cost itself and how we manage the risk.
Right.
Because that's something, but we need also to be careful how which function, which job area that we can legally outsource because we need
Mm,
also to comply with regulation as well. And
mm,
another thing outside of the outsourcing nowadays is the vendor or third parties.
mm,
Because as you know, now a lot of HR consultants nowadays are providing services that they can give to the company, they can give to to the business leaders in place of headcounts. So we can say, for example, like payroll. Maybe a lot of payroll services vendor now that they're offering their services or learning or recruitment. So
mm.
that's something that every HR professional also needs to address outside of monitoring the labor law, yes, of course, but also monitoring how is this, the evolution of the outsourcing third-party vendors itself in a business in the market and how it aligns with the business strategy, especially people strategy.
Right, 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 right. So essentially, you're saying that labor law is the number one priority that we
Yes.
need to keep a lookout on because it on an every year it will change. There will
Mm.
always a new revised one, so on and so forth. Whereas the second one that is sometimes overlooked is how international companies entering Indonesia planning their main power strategy. And
Exactly.
one specific thing is about outsourcing and vendor involvement, third party
Yes.
vendor involvement. And I
Yes.
do believe with you, Abu Vidia, as I meet more clients, as I meet more companies, international companies in
Mm.
Indonesia, um, sometimes sometimes those companies that are thriving are not the ones that have too much, too much
Yes.
employees under their
Exactly.
own organization. They
Yes.
have a lot of people administratively, but
Yes.
sometimes it is outsourced to another some function are outsourced to another companies,
Exactly.
which supposedly would provide a more lean organization, a more cost
Exactly.
efficient organization, and yeah, hopefully a more effective processes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's actually
completely
smart
agree.
strategy, Desun, if I can follow up on your
Right,
statement.
right, right, right.
That's actually smart strategy because every multinational company or foreign companies, especially who wants to do open market in
Mm,
Indonesia, right? They need to be careful, to be cautious in the beginning.
mm,
And often they take this step, this strategy that they started with a very few people, very
mm.
lean people on a strategic level, and then once the business grow, they grow with the business itself, the
Mm,
organization grow. And
right.
that's the smart way to do it. Instead of hiring a lot of people
Hiring
in
a
the
lot of
beginning.
people. Right.
Yes, because I need also to address termination cost in Indonesia is not cheap because our
Mm,
regulation, our labor law, leaning on the long-term manpower rather
mm.
than flexibility. I mean, compare
Oh,
with
I
other
see.
countries. So that's why when we hire in the hiring people strategy, we need also to consider the termination exposure cost. That if we hire people, we need to be also prepare the termination cost
Right.
in the long term.
Right, right, right. Completely
Yeah.
agree with you. So moving to the next question,
Mm-hmm.
Bufidia, I believe that throughout this session so far, we have mentioned a few times about labor law, right? And
Yes.
how the labor law always evolve from time to time.
Yes.
With that being said, how do you think labor law in Indonesia influence
Mm-hmm.
workforce planning for foreign
Mm-hmm.
company entering Indonesia?
Okay, so this is actually where Indonesian labor law stopped becoming legal topic, but
Mm,
instead of shaping the real business decision itself. Because
right.
first thing first, the HR professional who understand the regulations, they need to advise on the people strategy, hiring strategy first. Because how many people you hire? who you hire, which level of expertise that you need to hire first. Is it administration or is it strategic ones? It will be depend, and how long you hire them for. What kind of employment? Is it a fixed term contract or is it a long term or permanent ones? That's the kind of thing that we need to factor in, because as I mentioned earlier, that when we hire people, we need also think about when we terminate them, because it's how it is, because it's very logically a cost, I mean, it's logically a cost conscious, because we're not only okay, I'm capable as a company or business leader, I'm capable to hire this person, but are you really, as an HR, we need also to remind the business leader that do we really can afford if we terminate them. That's something that sometimes forget or underrated, because okay, I do have money, I do have budget, I can hire these people, but do we have capacity to terminate them later on? That's something that we need to address as well. So that's because cost modeling and also exit scenarios needs to be addressed and needs to be considered. uh, it's something, not only understanding labor law is one thing, but understanding the budget thing. HR professional needs to do this, because otherwise we cannot advise the business leader. We cannot be their business partner to advise, to give insights, the people strategy, cost effective or cost efficient, or risk manageable, and something like that. So that's another thing that also I haven't mentioned in the previous statements, that uh, I do believe, based on speaking of my experience in every multinational companies, we always have expatriations and localizations in terms of people, right? Especially in a leadership board, leadership management, managerial position. So it's not something that we avoid. Of course, expatriation, we are welcoming with the expatriations, but we need also to develop the local people as well. Why? Because it's not something that because the Indonesian people, we are living in Indonesian, right? We have been taught English maybe since the elementary school, but the culturally we are very shy in speaking and everything, right? It's only for English, but even though with Indonesian itself, culturally we are not people like American people or European people. They are very straightforward. We are very shy. We tend to keep to ourselves, and that's why the leaders who have a culturally fluent adaptation are very needed. I don't say that it's always local leaders. No, sometimes expatriate leaders who has culturally awareness, who has, learning culture, learning language, they can do that. But sometimes we need also the local leaders as a counterpart for the for the expat leaders, so that the people can also be more engaging, and then be more speak up, and addressing the issues on the workplace. That's something that sometimes often underrated as well. But we need also to address, and we need also to monitor this kind of thing.
Right. Thank you so much, Pufidia. I mean, I really like your first point when it comes to hiring strategy. You also need to think about the exit strategy, exit scenarios, or essentially the contingency plan. Because I do believe that a lot of people worries about how can they grow their company. Not a lot of people actually thinking about what if it doesn't work and we need to reshape it again. Something that is definitely something that gets overlooked a lot. And obviously, when we're talking about expatriation leadership and how do you balance it with the local capabilities, how do you actually try to, get in um making the local people be more international, whereas making the international people
Be more
to be more
local.
local.
Yes, yes.
So that's definitely something that needs a proper planning
Yep.
from by the HR team. I completely agree with you. Now, certainly moving on to the next question. I believe during this session we established that regulation in Indonesia, it's always changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and sometimes changes, big or small, it would disrupt the business operation.
Yep.
With that being said, how do you think that an HR professional should plan for regulatory changes without ever disrupting the business operation?
Okay. That is a very right questions because change is inevitably. So we cannot predict or we cannot forecast changes. It's always happen, right? So the thing is how we as a professional, especially as an HR, by these changes because we cannot control the changes. By these changes, we can absorb the changes without disrupting the business. That's the follow-up question from your previous question. So basically, as an HR, I think it's also for the business leader. But as an HR, we need to understand, we need to prioritize which are the urgent matters, the major to be complied first, and then which are needs to be a pending, maybe a hold on, maybe not right now but later on we can comply, or some things that we can just monitor the progress, not to be adapt right away, because we need also to understand the business. So this is where HR, I think, not only as an human resources partner, or as the what you call it, like the kitchen or the back office people. So this is something that HR needs to step up as a business enabler, as the business partner itself. So why we need to understand our business. We need to understand the flow of the business that we're working in the company. For example, and if we're working in a financial industry, we need to understand the financial industry business. Think like the business leaders, not think like an HR. So we need to have the business acumen for the HR people. Sometimes I got a lot of question, why you should, why you know a lot of the business, you're the HR. And then I always say, like, why not? Because as an HR, that's the first thing that you need to know. Why? Because if there are changes that's related with the HR, you can have the business overview, and then you can know, understand which priority that you need to advise your leaders first. That's how you can get the buy-in from your business leaders, because you think like them, right? You have the mindset like them, not an HR. You have, it's like a 50-50. So in a communication wise, you can communicate with your business leader, like for example, the non-negotiable ones. Okay, so Pak, Bu, the business leader itself, we have the increment on the UMP, basic minimum wage, that we need to address. If not, this is the risk that we need to compensate if we not comply. That's something that we need to address. Not only like, no, we cannot, because we cannot speak with our HR language to the business leaders, because we need to get the buy-in from them, because it's something that budgeting increase, of course, right? But that's something that we need, or something that okay, for example, few years back, we have natura pajak natura, natura tax, benefit in kind tax, that apply to everyone, right? But we need to understand, so what is this kind of thing, and then after that we can okay, it's not something, it is a priority for compliance, but it's not something mandatory for now, because one or two thing, we need to understand our business, we need to understand our financial position, something like that. That's something that it's not urgent thing, but we need to comply, but maybe we can postpone a little bit while, not applying by this year, but maybe next year. That's something that we need to absorb. And something about monitor. I mentioned about the pension age. Pension age in BPJS is always changing every 2 or 3 years, right? But as long as it's not mandated, and as long as we put it in our peraturan perusahaan or PP, that's something that we can still, okay, we can say to our business, okay, by labor law is like this, but we have another compliance things this. So basically, what business leaders or business owners understand is they need to know the potential risk. Not every our proposal get approval, of course. Sometimes get a lot rejection as well from the business leaders. That's something I think every HR professionals understand it very well, because we are the budget spender in the company, not the budget. But we are not cost. We are a cost center. We are not.
Mm, revenue
Uh,
center.
yes, exactly. So, but we need also to address to the business leader the potential risk that we're having. So they
Right.
need to know the decision is still coming from them.
Mm,
They can decide whatever they want, but they need to get a full perspective of the
mm,
risk itself, of the opportunity
mm.
of this decision, so
Right.
they can give better decisions. That's what
Right.
we thought.
Right. So essentially, to be able to plan it right, number
Mhm.
one, you need to prioritize which needs to happen now, which needs to happen later, which needs to be just to be assessed.
Yes.
And secondly, when it comes to finding new changes, when proposing it to the management, HR leaders needs to be able to be strategic, not only saying like, hey, these are changing, but doing an analysis of these are changing. If we don't comply, here's what happened. If we comply, here's what happened. Um,
Yes.
so that everything could be well planned. Everything could happen faster, and essentially getting more approvals by from the higher management. Yeah, Bu
Yes.
Vidya, yeah.
Yes.
All
Exactly.
right. I think that is very useful for people to know. Now, moving on to the very last question of our session.
Mhm.
Before we get into our last question, Bu Vidya, I really wanted to say
Mhm.
that um, throughout this session, we've covered a lot of new insights from from your side. I believe that you've turned more rocks when it comes to regulations, when it comes to HR policies for international companies, which really shows your expertise within the area. Now, on the last question, I really wanted to hear from you. What kind of advice would you give to HR leaders or maybe younger HRs that are preparing their organization to enter Indonesia?
Okay. So I'm going to give advice that I was given like 15, 16 years ago by my mentor at that time, because I still remember until this day, because my mentor at that time said to me that as an HR, forget about doing administrative things, payroll, learning, recruitment, compensation, benefit, and everything. That's something skillful technically that you should have, but don't make it as your key skills, because the key skill of an HR is actually the business acumen, business understanding. So we are as a nation, we are different, like specific role job, for example, like geologists, geoscientists, drilling engineers, or IT software developers. That's a very specific technical skills role job, right? HR is actually as long as there are people, there's an HR. That's our motto, right? As long as there are people, there are HR. So we can be in a very across industries. For example, we can, from the tech companies to the oil and gas companies to the financial industries to banking industries to consultants to anything. But the key points or the red line is actually the business acumen. Once as an HR, everything is the same, not the same, always evolving as well. for example, like compensation, when we're talking about recruitment strategy, when we're talking about learning strategy, when we're talking about compensation benefits, it's similar everywhere. But the distinguished thing is actually the business acumen. So we need also to understand the business. So I remember when I was in an oil and gas company, and then my population is the production population, I went directly to the platform, to the offshore platform. I want to know exactly what is the mechanical engineering, what is the electrical system, what is the control system, instruments, and everything. How is the drilling, from drilling from drilling until production, until I mean from the very beginning exploration, the geology things, and then the drilling until the production itself. How is it the process, and how is the regulation of this business? What license that we need to address? Which government function that we need to liaise to? Which regulation we should monitor? What is the market? How is the, that's something that we need always to know. So it's always good for HR to have the business understanding, because that's where you put your contribution or your impact actually. Because yes, we're talking about people, but we're talking about the business as well. And we need also to understand, as a business partner, we're always in between, always in between. We're not fully in the management side, and we're not fully on the employee side. We're always in between. So that's something that I think as an HR, the very first quality is that it's not, it's easy to say, but it's hard to do, is that you need to be strategic, but at the same time you also have to be empathetic, because fully strategic HR without heart is not human, because we're dealing with human. And a fully empathetic HR without strategy is useless, because you will be only like labor representative. You're not HR, because you're not making impact. That's
Right.
something that we need to address. And of course, it, I think it applies to everywhere, every role of job, that continuously learning. There's always sky above the sky. So
Mm.
we never be the smartest person in the room. Never be.
Right, right, right,
That's
right,
my
right.
there's something that we need to learn every day from everyone, from everywhere. Maybe
Right,
that's something that we need every HR professional should know, I think.
right. Completely agree with you, Bu Vidia. I do believe that HR function is earlier you mentioned that HR function is is a cost center, right? But not only that, but HR function is actually the heartbeat of the company that keeping everything together. Um, and with that being said, to be a good HR leader, be your company is stagnating, your company is expanding, your company is divesting, the HR people need always to be the most strategic one to be able to foresee any risk, to be able to manage whatever risk essentially is coming to the company. So yeah, thank you so much, Bufidia. I do believe that should conclude our session today. And I personally believe that this session would be very valuable for the people watching. So thank you so much, Bufidia. And to everyone, thank you so much for watching this session of NusantaraX Playbook. If you find this session valuable, feel free to share it with your colleagues or team who are essentially exploring opportunities in Indonesia. We will continue bringing in more experienced professionals to help you navigate this dynamic market. Thank you so much, Pufidia. This is me, Des from Ventures Link. See you on the next session of NusantaraX Podcast Series. Bye bye.